Starting a bookkeeping business can sometimes be, well, a little scary. You might be new to working for yourself, or you might have been winging it for a while. Maybe you've got a little side hustle bookkeeping business going on. Either way, you don't have to go it alone. I'm Lynn Talbot, and I've scaled and sold a 7-figure bookkeeping business, and I've been where you are now. I know the problems you're facing, and I want to share what I had to learn the hard way to help you on your journey. So follow along and let's get your bookkeeping business where you want it to be. Well, welcome to the Better Bookkeeping Show, where we help bookkeepers overcome their fear of growing their business and get on the path to financial independence. I'm your host, Lynn Talbot, and today we're diving into a topic that can feel like a big leap. How to go from being an independent bookkeeper to becoming a true business owner. Now, I'll be honest, with me, it kind of happened by accident. I just wanted to work part-time and make some extra money while my kids are in school. I did not plan to own a bookkeeping firm. I literally just wanted to make some extra money. So it happened by accident. People just kept coming, and I had a habit of not being able to say no to anyone. I said yes to everyone. Big mistake. There'll be another podcast about that probably, about how to say no or how to vet your clients better. But with me, I found another bookkeeper who I was training at the time. She was working for a company and she wanted to go part-time. I think she had some family matters. And so I took a chance and hired her. And that really showed me how to supervise bookkeepers, how to move from just doing everything to trying to supervise bookkeepers. And so how it worked for me was I would hire one person and I would give them one client at a time until they felt comfortable, maybe two if they were super small and easy. And then I would give them one client, the next week another client, the next week another client, and until they felt comfortable. The worst thing you want to do is hire somebody and give them 20 clients right off the bat, and that's overwhelming. You wouldn't like that either. So the journey that I was on just kept going and going and going. And it would still be going today had I not sold my business, because I'm still learning how to say no to some clients. But there's one thing, moving from solo bookkeeper to an entrepreneur, it isn't just about hiring people. It takes planning, strategy, and most important, a shift in your mindset. So that's often the biggest challenge for us as bookkeepers, because we're so used to being in the weeds, just doing everything and, being really organized and wanting to kind of be in control of everything. Does that sound familiar? So you have to understand what it takes to move from doing the books to running a bookkeeping firm. You can no longer be the sole decision maker, the one that meets with all the clients, makes all the decisions, because you'll just become a bottleneck. And then you'll become frustrated that you're just working harder and harder and harder, and you're getting more clients, and you're going to get burned out because you don't see how to get out of that. So if you've ever thought, am I ready to grow? I'm an independent bookkeeper. I'm doing my own thing. Boy, what would it be like to have some financial freedom, maybe just being more than just an independent bookkeeper, looking beyond yourself and being an entrepreneur, because it's different. So what would it look like to run a team? Well, this episode is for you. So let's talk about what it really takes to stop working in your business and start working on it. Joining me today is Heather Moreland, who is in our training circle. And Heather mentioned to me the other day when we were on a one-on-one meeting about just how she had this aha moment and how amazed she was to move from being a bookkeeper to being a bookkeeper owner. And that mindset shift with her and kind of how that happened. So what I'd like for her to do is tell us how, in her experience, that independent bookkeeper mind shift, change to bookkeeper owner. So welcome to the show, Heather. Tell us a little bit, you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then kind of how you got to that mind shift change.
thank you, Lynn. I'm really glad to be here. And so I was also an independent bookkeeper for a little while. I left my corporate job back in 2022 and started looking for how do I bring the same value that I was able to bring at a corporate level to small business owners who really need that information. So that was my mission, was how do I help small business owners have the details they need and empower them to make really good decisions. So one of my first clients was, we had a large cleanup project. It took several months, and I was working with the team there. As I learned how important cleanups were to the whole process, that really became the foundation of, when I go look for clients, I'm looking for people that have a mess that I can clean up, and then I let them be a maintenance person. After that engagement, we moved to a new state and started doing cleanups there. And a friend from my previous hometown reached out and said, "Hey, I'd like to come work with you. I don't want to say the job I'm in, but I've really been enjoying bookkeeping. Do you need help?" And I really respected this person. I knew that I could trust her. I knew that she did good work. She may not have had all the skills that I needed her to have at that point, but I knew that she fit the model of, this is a person I would like to work with on a daily basis. And really the trust was a big deal. We're going to be in different states. It's going to be a virtual firm. Do I trust that she will not only represent us well to the clients, but be able to do the work, have good integrity, all those things? And I said, "I'm not really ready for you yet, but let's come on." Because I know that we're growing. I know that the time is right. So that's how I brought on my first person. It was also kind of accidental because I didn't think I was ready for that, but it was a great decision.
Yeah, when you bring somebody on, it's sort of like that. You find the right person, it can make the huge difference. And I like one of the things you said. It's about trust. I'll tell you right now, if you cannot trust your employees, like you have trained them or they come with their own skill sets and you're kind of, fine tuning how you want to present you and your company, and you cannot trust them, you have hired the wrong person. They've just got to go, because bookkeeping is all about trust, and being a business owner is all about trust. So that is huge. And that is sometimes hard for business owners because, and I'll speak for myself too, in case you had this too, it's like, well, I know everything. I know how to do it. I'm the best person. Like I've vetted all these clients and they all like me, they trust me. And you get a little nervous when you pass them on to someone else. Are they going to be able to uphold that? And is the client going to feel comfortable if you pass them off? And I will tell you, that was a problem for me too. Some clients were like, "Well, are you passing me off?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, yes."
I'm delegating.
Yes. And I would refer to us as a team. I would be like, "Well, Heather's going to work on this, but I'm still here. I'm still providing." And at that time, I would provide CFO services for anybody that wanted it. You call me anytime to set up a meeting. And I made sure that I conveyed that so they didn't feel like they were losing me, because that's who they hired, and that's who they hired. So yeah, trust is huge. And so you talked a little bit about, how did you know when you were ready for your first hire? And, it sort of happened. I think that's kind of how it happens. You find the right person, and then you say, well, if the business keeps growing, people keep coming to me, I can certainly have her up and running, pretty quickly. So how did that go for you? Like, how did you know when to start pushing clients onto her, and how did that work for you?
So I knew early on, the first couple of months, I'll use her name. Her name's Whitney. She's still with us. She's great. And she's now our cleanup queen, we call her. And I knew early on that she wanted, 10 to 15 hours or so. And so I just started saying, which things can I give to her to fill up those 15 hours? Because anything that I can give to her, and then she proves that she's competent, proves that she can handle it, then frees me up to do something else. Or some days it was to take a nap because I needed to take a nap, and that's part of my journey of building my business includes health issues. And so that's part of that. But so I just started finding, what can I give Whitney? Sometimes that was working on the newsletter. Sometimes that was reconciling things. Sometimes it was just scheduling. And I just started figuring out, what is Whitney good at? What does she like doing? And hand off what I could. So that started at 15 hours. And then a couple months later, she said, hey, I need to come on full time. So I'm coming. And I said, great, let's figure out how to do that. A few months after that, we found another person who was very skilled, had great qualities, loved her character. We liked working with her, and we brought her on part-time and then full-time a couple months after that. And it just became this progression of, if I trust them and I don't want to be a micromanager, because that's a big deal for me, I don't want to micromanage anybody, then I need to just start finding things, identifying things that I can let go of and see how it goes. Sometimes it hasn't been perfect and I have to call the client and say, hey, we messed up. I'm going to own it because I'm responsible for it. And then we fix it and we mend things and we move on and we try again. So there's been some potholes every once in a while, but overall, the team is starting to hold their own and they learn from that experience. I continue to be able to trust them. Like, that builds trust over time too.
Yes, I like that. And that's what I found too, is though I am not a micromanager at all. And I tell my employees when they come on, I just said, look, I am here. You can call me anytime, and I will always pick up the phone or hop on a call or hop in a file. And they know that. And that's what I think they probably know about you too, is that they're not just alone out there. But I also don't want to micromanage them. But I said, if you get into like, and after a while, you get into a groove with your employees, right? Where they're like, maybe I should touch base with Heather about this. This client is sounding a little different than what we had thought, or something's kind of fishy going on, or the client's getting aggravated, or something's happened and you don't want to, you sort of want to raise the little red flag. And that's what I tell my employees. I say, look, I don't ever want a client to call me and surprise me with something like, oh, your employee did this or said that, and it's not what we had agreed on. So I said, just let me know. And the nice thing about the thing that you have to remember as a business owner is you can't blow up at anybody. You can't freak out. You're just like, oh, well, thank you for telling me. Let's figure out how to fix that. And I remember my employees, several employees, they still do come to me and say, you were so calm. Like, I forgot to pay somebody's sales tax for 2 months. Like, just, I don't know what happened, just forgot to pay it. And of course, the client called when they got a letter, and I'm just like, okay, well, we got to figure this out. And I tell them, come to me with, if you have a problem, come to me, but try to come to me with a solution too, so we can work through it. And then that brings me to like setting up processes so that if things like this do happen, or you've got, bookkeeping, you've got a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts every day. Every client is different. You can't just set up a schedule and say, oh, reconcile every month and we're good. Because every client has something that they need that's beyond reconciling. And understanding those nuances and being able to meet those nuances is what makes you a good bookkeeper, a firm owner, right? You can just kind of do things. So what are some of the processes when looking back now that you say helped you, or that you maybe got in place, or maybe I got mine in place way too late because I didn't know I needed that until it started bottlenecking at me and overwhelming me. So what are some of the processes that you found helpful when you moved to that area?
So the first thing I would say is I found a managed IT service. That was incredibly helpful. So when I started bringing on a new person and I wanted them to have a Lakesite email address that matched mine, and then I wanted to have shared SharePoint and Teams and things that were enterprise, I realized pretty quickly that my software capabilities were very limited, not my wheelhouse. So bringing on a managed service that said, yes, we will set up all of your IT for you. We will manage your devices for harmful things, and also keep your centralized databases managed. I mean, that was a huge help. It was an investment for sure, but once I got enough employees that I was at my minimum user level, it's very cost effective. And so that was a big deal, was starting to build the foundation of how can we share files safely? How do we work together well? The next thing was encouraging clients to have a accounting email that's their domain so that they own the email inbox, but then they have a place to send all of their receipts, their invoices. Some clients have one for just receipts, and then they have one for bills, and then they have one for invoicing, so that things are clearly in their own spots. That keeps it from clogging up our inboxes, but also it allows them to maintain a permanent record of what has been done if they decided to take their bookkeeping somewhere else. And so I like that separation of responsibility a little bit.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like, so you have a client and let's just say it's, company ABC. And you would say, hey, company ABC, you've got a lot of receipts and invoices and stuff going on. We're going to set up an email called accounting@ABC. And then your employee would manage that account like for them. And then you're right. If you leave or something happens, you decide not to have this client anymore, all that stuff is still with the client, right?
Yes.
I like that. We started implementing that like probably 10 years after I started working. So you're ahead of the game. But that's a really good point. So our listeners should understand what we're talking about. When you have a lot of clients, especially clients that are, just very, very busy and they're emailing you every day, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. Here's the inventory sheet. Here's this only. Here's my sales tax. This is messed up. My point of sale system is messed up, blah, blah, blah. They're emailing you constantly. Having that accounting email helps clean out your inbox. So say Heather has 2 or 3 employees. She's got, all of it at lakesiteaccounting.com. Well, if that employee leaves, Heather's got to then go back into that email and go back through and see what's going on or what was said and some of the things we need to save, just for future reference or payroll items or things like that. And then before we delete that file, but you don't really have access to that employee file all the time, right? Because we can't really just get into the employee email. I mean, you'd think you could as the business owner, but in the way Gmail works, you can't unless you ask and change the password or whatever and then change it back. So at least that's how I understand it. There's probably some fancy ways that people can do that that's more expensive. But having that accounting email, I think, is really great. And the client owns it. It's theirs. And you just manage it that way. So I think that is a great idea. That process helps eliminate a lot of back and forth and a lot of clogging up the email. How about storing documents? What do you find helps you when your clients they're sending you documents every day?
So we use SharePoint, which is Microsoft's version of cloud storage. What I like about SharePoint is you can set up folders for inside of your company. So we have lots of, a set of folders for, are they coaching clients? Are they maintenance clients? Are they cleanup clients? And then within that, then we have a folder for each client. And then within that, we have bank statements and financial statements and 1099 records and all the different things that go into that. So we have a really nice organized set of folders. What you can do inside of that is, let's say inside of a client's folder, I have a shared folder. And I say that is what any documents that we're comfortable with the client seeing, which is most of their stuff. But of course, there's some things that I want to keep from them. But then I share that specific folder with them. It requires 2-factor authentication, which I like. And it makes it so that anything that we just drop in there, they can see it in real time. Now, some clients don't like using it. So they have a Dropbox and they invite us to their Dropbox. Or so there's other ways. Sometimes they have Google Drive, which surprisingly is not my favorite thing. I've struggled with Google Drive for whatever reason, but my team loves it. So, to each their own, I guess. But so if we are running it and setting it up for them, we use our SharePoint folders. But sometimes they already have a system and they like it, and we just pick up with
Sure.
that.
And that makes sense. And one of the things that I have been doing lately is trying to store as many documents as I can in that accountant portal inside QBO, because that does allow for the CPA maybe to see it, all the bookkeepers, and if I have someone working on my file, so I can see it, my employee can see it, the client can see it, the CPA can see it, and then I don't have to go back and forth to another document. So the thing about the accountant portal, it's good, but it's very limited in how you can do it for whatever reason. And I hope QBO will hear this and fix this. For some reason, clients or any of my employees can't create a folder. Only the accountant can create a folder. So I'm stuck again going back and saying, okay, here's your bank statements, here's your credit card statements. And now that a new year is starting, I usually do it by year, and I'll box everything up and throw it in 2024 and move on to 2025 so that I don't have to look through and sort through things. The client can upload there really easily. And so I do like them to do that, but it does have its sort of limitations in that getting it organized, it's probably not as good as SharePoint in its organizational ability. But for a small client that you're just doing a couple of, a credit card and a couple of bank statements, that's probably a good place to put things. And I will put in there year-end data as well, like maybe the trial balance that the CPA has given me, or after taxes, I'll put after tax trial balance and then close the file, and I'll put that in there so that next year we're all looking around for the trial balance for last year. I can find it, and the CPA, we can all agree that was what we used for the tax return. And if QuickBooks doesn't say that, somebody's been in there, dinking around, right?
Right.
So we use that as well. The CPAs don't seem to know about that. Every time they're like, what are you talking about? So I do have to do some education there and show them where that is. And so I think that's a good thing. If QuickBooks can get that maybe shored up a little bit more, that might be a good place to store documents. But if you're sharing spreadsheets and things like that, that's not a place to do it. It doesn't share spreadsheets and all that. It doesn't really, allow you to share like Google Docs or the SharePoint would. So that's good. So moving from mindset, we're talking about like your mindset. What are some of the things? I'm trying to think of when I went through that transition. It was real exciting. Like it was like, oh my gosh, I don't ever have to be inside somebody's books doing bookkeeping again. I can just review and look and kind of supervise. And so moving from that doer to a supervisor was actually fun for me. I liked that transition, and for whatever reason, it worked well. My employees I had just awesome employees. So they were able to kind of help me through that transition. If I started micromanaging or doing things, we could work on it together. That's kind of how you have to get through it. And you have to be open with your employees and say, hey, where's the line? If you just go and do your thing. But moving from that, how did that feel for you? Is there any other way to explain it except from that aha moment from operator to owner?
This sounds crazy because, this is a bookkeeping firm, but I realized that while I really like checking things off a list, and bookkeeping is a great way to check things off a list, I don't love bookkeeping. Like I realized that I didn't start a bookkeeping business because it's what I'm so passionate about. That's what I want to be spending all of my hours doing. I did it really because that's what I knew I was able to do. That's what I knew I was qualified for. But what I really love is, like you said, the reviewing, the analysis, let's talk to the client about what this means for them. What's the story of it? So not having to do the daily tasks that get to the story is actually, you're right, I prefer that. And I have found, so part of the reason part of our brand is that I want us to be warm and friendly and not scary to people that are not finance types, but still have the capability to talk to the CPA. I think we talked about this in the last podcast a little bit. So if I'm able to be a good connector, that checks all the relationship bubbles that I love. I love talking to people. I love helping them feel comfortable, helping them understand things. So yes, so shifting into the owner role allowed me to really step into how do I focus on the relationships, primarily with my employees, but also then with my clients. How do I smooth things out and make the processes better? And stepping back and looking at the whole system, how do I improve the system so that my team loves the work that they're doing, so that my clients feel like they're supported and they have the information they want? And the CPA at the end of the year goes, great. That was way easier than last year when I was shoeboxing all of their receipts together. I want to be a huge resource for the CPA too. So, yes, I don't love entering AP bills and making sure that payroll runs. That is just not the thing that makes me excited to wake up in the morning. But my team loves that. I mean, there's people on my team that's just what they love doing. That's great. I need to let them do that because they're good at it, and I need to get out of their way. So I realized, I think this is the aha you were talking about. My job is to set the direction now and say, this is where we should be going with these guidelines of our culture and our boundaries of what we're willing to do. And then I need to get out of their way because they are, in a lot of ways, more competent to get us there than I am, or than I feel most of the time.
That is a great explanation. I love that. Yes, and getting out of their way, and that's hard for a bookkeeper to do. And that's probably the hardest part of changing your mindset. And it comes when you trust your employees, when they're like, Lynn, I got this, and you're like, oh, you do. And then you move from, having to just micromanage everything. Or, a lot of my clients were people I had met professionally through chamber meetings. A lot of them were kind of my friends or friends of friends. So I felt a huge obligation to make sure that their needs were met and that I was, because my name's on everything, right? Like you too. You're like, this is the Heather Moreland, people expect you. If something goes wrong, it's going to come back to you. It's going to come back to the business owner. And so you always want to be, in there. But finding somebody that you trust is huge. And then getting out of their way. I love how you said that. Now, I went from, one employee, I used to have just a lot of part-time employees because that was when I hired people, most of them were working moms. And they're like, I really just want to work part-time. It's sort of overwhelming sometimes to take on 20 bookkeeping clients, like as a full-time job. And so bookkeeping does lend itself easily to a part-time job. So I ended up with 15 employees, maybe 3 or 4 full-time and all the rest were part-time. And they were happy. I would just say exactly what you did. How many hours do you want to work? And I would ask that like 2 or 3 times a year. Are we still good? Are you meeting your goals? I would look at the timesheets, and we use T-sheets to track their time so it would bill directly. And then I would say, okay, you're only getting 15 or 20. Are we okay? Sometimes in the summer they would want to go down in their hours, which I'm like, perfect, because that's the time when things kind of slow down a little bit. And so it bookkeeping lends itself to working part-time and for part-time moms really well. And so that helped me. And I would let people work at home. This is in 2015 and 2016, way before COVID and before people were able to work from home. I was doing some remote work and just saying, look, I don't really care when you do this, because in my eyes, there weren't like bookkeeping emergencies, but you did have to be available during the week to meet with me. So one of the things I did is I met with my team every week. We would just have a team meeting, and I would say, this is the only thing that's mandatory. You have to come to this team meeting. And we would try to work it out, because I'm like you, I've got people on the West Coast, and we try to work it out when people, when everybody could get there. And that was when we met. And if, they had kids that were sick or something happened, that was fine. But we met every week, and we would say we would have people tell us what's going on. What are your struggles this week? What's going on? And sometimes it would come out that, look, I am struggling with this client. I'm really wanting to I just don't really want to do this client anymore for whatever reason. And another person would say, oh, I love that. I can do that. Let me take them. Like either I know them or whatever. And so working in a team like that really helped everybody. Like you said, try to keep your team happy. Like, what do you like to do? I had one gal that loved animals. She worked for Humane Society. So I gave her every animal. We had dog trainers and groomers, and I gave her every animal thing, and she thrived, And you probably do the same thing, right? You're like, somebody really likes this area, or they're maybe a creative person. You give them all the creative people, and they thrive. And that's kind of how you have to think about it as a business owner. What works best? I like how you said, look at the thing as a whole. And how can I make this process better? And another thing you mentioned that I really like, that I wanted our listeners to focus on, is when you move from being a bookkeeper to being the firm owner, you do need to shift your mindset that you're more of a CFO. You need to look at the client files as a whole, almost like a CPA would. Where have they been? Where are they now? Where are they going? What trends do you see? And how can you help them? When you're able to step back and you're seeing all the clients, you'll get a little more courage to say, you know what? I think this client's chart of accounts is really bad. And I didn't want to say it the first year we worked on it because it was his chart of accounts and he was touchy about it. But now that I've seen 40 clients' chart of accounts, this is hindering everybody. It's hindering the client. It's hindering us. We need to go merge some chart of accounts. And so you have the ability, like you say, look at the processes and saying, what could make this smoother for the client and the employee? And you know what? You can suggest that really nice. You can just say, hey, I've been looking at that. Would you mind if I merged a couple? Here are a couple suggestions. I won't overwhelm the client with like a whole spreadsheet. I'll just say, here are 3 suggestions. And this is why I like that. And, often I'll get back, yes, that's great. And I'll say, great, merge those. I'll give them a couple of weeks and then we'll come back and say, we're doing it again. And some clients, you know the client, so you know how fast you can go or how much you can suggest before they say, get out of my business, So, but working on the business and really helping the clients fine tune. And what happens is you'll find, especially if you're paying, you've got monthly clients, like you're like, for $500 a month, I'm doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. And then you're like, I think we can streamline this. I think we can get rid of these chart of accounts. I think we can get rid of bringing this point of sale system in. I think we can get rid of the way he's doing this. This is like 3 steps, really looking at it. And then when you hone it down, you may be cut off 2 hours a month for your bookkeeper, but you're still getting the $500. You're doing the same task, but you're streamlining it. That was what I was able to do once I stopped working in the books. I was able to start streamlining everybody. And you sort of find little ways to do that. And your employees find ways to do that. And they suggest to you. And you're like, that's awesome. Let's do that. Did you find some streamlining that you were able to look better at streamlining processes when you were not in the books?
I would say we're still a little too early for that, in the sense that I don't feel like I'm so stable that I'm quite ready to able to just jump in there and look for all the efficiencies. But I will say that we are better equipped to add value on the reporting side now. We know what kinds of questions to ask when we bring on a client. That my early ones, I didn't even know QuickBooks could do this stuff. The idea of I met with somebody yesterday, and it's a pet grooming type place, and we had our initial consult, and he mentioned, we have all these different subgroups of our revenue. Well, our revenue is split out in their different groups, but our expenses are not. And so I asked him, well, would it be meaningful for you to know how much of your payroll is going to which income stream? And he goes, we can do that. I said, yeah, but I didn't know 2 years ago that QuickBooks had so I started explaining how the classes work, and we can split out and track revenue that way if that's something that would actually provide value. And he got very excited about that. So his current bookkeeping doesn't include that. So yes, knowing which percentage of where his total income is coming from, that is a helpful metric, but it's not as helpful as being able to say, is each of those departments being profitable? or which one has the best margins, or where should we start investing more of our effort and more of our employees or whatever. So being able to paint the picture for him of this is what your reporting could look like if we had the right information on the front end to get it inside QuickBooks. That's where we've really tried to improve our forecasting. Like, this is what's possible. Now tell me of what's possible, what really is valuable for you, and that's what we can do. I think that's the thing that sets us apart too, because we're not just trying to check the box that it's reconciled. Is it actually useful when we're done?
Yes. And how does that look for the business owner? Like, what I always ask in my intakes, I say, what information do you need as a business owner to make business decisions this coming year? Like, what's happening this year? Because, they can't think 10 years from now. They're in the weeds right now. And they're just panicking. They've not, if they've come to you, they probably have, terrible bookkeeping, bookkeeping hot mess. And they're like, I'm like, what do you need to know? What business information, what numbers do you need to know to help you make your business decisions this year? Like, what are we doing? And they'll tell me, and that's very good, because then you can add value. You can say, yes, we can do that. It's going to be a little more work. We might have to set it up, but we can certainly do that. Let me get you a proposal on that. And that's what I do. But you're right, being able to not only streamline, but also see where you can add value. I like that. Those are the two things that you can do when you move from being an operator to a business owner. And when you add value, generally you're adding more income to your income as well. And the last topic I want to talk about before we get off, and Heather and I discussed this a little bit too, is that when you're an independent bookkeeper, you're pretty much you can't work more than a certain amount of hours, and whatever you're charging per hour, that's your income. And if you get tired or burned out, or you want to take a 2-week vacation, chances are your income's going to go down a little bit, or you're just going to be limited. And Heather and I talked about really how valuable it was to move from bookkeeper owner, still managing everything. I'm not being an absentee owner here. We're managing and we're helping the processes, but being able to get that financial freedom that we are now have or working toward, right? That difference. And did that, Heather, have a little play a role in you deciding to move from independent bookkeeper to a business owner?
It did. Early on, it was scary, of course, to bring on a new person, because I was trying to find things for them to do and figuring out the process of how much of their time can I bill to the client and at what rates and all those things. But once we made it past those initial hurdles, I realized that, whatever the numbers were, if 3 of my team members' hours replace the income of mine based on the margins or something like that. And so I started kind of doing the math of if I knew that I needed to bill 30 hours a week, but I really couldn't do that. So now if I could have a team member billing 30 hours a week, well, now I have to bill 20, and I'm at the same general, that's rough estimates, but it allowed me to then say, okay, now those 10 hours that I don't have to bill to the client, I can start helping my business foundation be better, so that I'm prepared to then take on the second person, or so that I can maybe bill some of those hours and set aside some savings to help my working capital grow, so that I'm able to have more clients that have more accounts receivable, that have more payroll to support it, all those things that increase as you bring on more people. But I started saying, I want to pay my team really well. At the same time, I need to have some return from that so that it frees me up to be in the manager owner role, which they need me to do. The stability of their jobs and the longevity of having good clients and having a good place to work depends on me being able to do those good, important owner things. They know it, I know it. And so it's a good balance of saying, Heather, we're just going to work on the stuff that we're doing. Let us know if we need to change anything, but we're just going to head down and do the work. And now my job becomes, let's make something that is stable over the long haul, so that they're not worried about whether a paycheck's coming next week. I don't want them to ever worry about that. The Lord's been very kind. He provides every time that seems like we're going to have a shortfall, but part of that is them helping me get out of the task-oriented business side and getting into the strategic side so that we can keep growing.
Yes. And you know that when you move, I remember for me moving from, hiring my first person, and I was still busy, still billing 30, 40, 50 hours, and then had somebody, and then, hired somebody else, and then somebody else, and then somebody else. And it, that first year, I will say I probably didn't take home very much money because I was really working on building the business. So that's one thing you have to sort of think about is that first year transition. It doesn't just happen overnight. It could happen if you really plan everything out, but you can't just take your 30 hours and pop them on somebody else and then expect to just make the same amount of money, right? Because you've got to pay them. And so, like you said, you've got to still work 10 to 15. And then, but if you have a team of three is a good team. Like 3 people can really help elevate you from what you were making to doubling what you were making. And I had at one time up to 15 employees. That was a lot. When you go from about 8 or 9 to about 10 employees, that's just almost chaos. You have to have different systems in place. There's just too much going on, and people are moving almost too quickly for me. And I move pretty fast, and I don't miss anything. But 15 employees, bookkeeping, that's hard. It's when you have to hire another manager, like a operations manager, to manage everything. And that was when I said, I don't want to hire an operations manager. I tried and tried. I couldn't really find somebody that could replace me. I just couldn't find that person. And that was the time when I was like, you know what? I can sell this firm now and make 7 figures and then go and get out. And so that's the name of the game, is you grow a little bit, but don't grow too fast before your systems catch up with you and do that. And that first year might be a little struggle for you. So we always tell people, you might want to have some capital on the side and just realize that first year, might be a little bit down. But as you grow, after you get 3 people, you'll be set, financially. You'll be doing a lot better than just one, just you. So that wraps up our show today. And I appreciate Heather being here with you.
Thanks, Lynn.
And if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button.